You are listening to Love Your Practice with Dr. Laura Mock. I'm a general dentist, a practice owner, and a certified life coach. I teach women who own dental practices to lead with intention and literally fall in love with their businesses. Keep listening and you will see how learning to love your practice turns into loving your life too. Well, hi there. Welcome to another episode of my podcast, Love Your Practice. I'm Dr. Laura Mock, and today's episode is a very special one. Some of you may have heard of a dentist. His name was Manu Dua, who passed away from oral cancer earlier this year. He went through all of his treatments during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he was young. He was, I think, 34 when he passed away. And his writings have become a book. His sister compiled them, and it's already published, and it's out there. It's called Life Interrupted. And this episode, I'm interviewing his sister and just listening to her story and the things that she has learned and experienced through kind of escorting her brother out of this life and the things that she went through. So it's a very special story. Please stick with us. Lots of life lessons to be learned with this one. Thanks again. We'll see you on the other side. All right. I'm so happy and grateful to be welcoming to the podcast Dr. Parul Dua Makkar. Dr. Makkar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you reached out. Your story is so poignant, and I'm going to let you tell it here in a minute, but I just want to say what you're doing right now and sharing your story is really important. And I think it's important for all of us female dental practice owners to really be thinking about the message that you're here to share. So I just really appreciate you taking the time and the energy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you are a general dentist, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Practicing in Long Island. Yeah.
Right. And you own your practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. And we sort of met basically because I found an article that was going viral that your brother wrote. And I'm going to stop here and I'm going to let you kind of take over the story of why we were sharing this article that your brother wrote.
So the article you just mentioned, Manu wrote, it was published in the Dental Town magazine about leaving dentistry this way out. And I remember being in his house 2 days after his death and picking up the magazine and looking at it. And my mom saying, well, he found his way out of life. And this article was it went viral. It's documented and reflected on by many dentists and in different podcasts and articles. It was because he was talking about how we as dentists may not find the fulfillment that we need, and maybe it's not our true calling, and understanding that and being okay with knowing that dentistry is not for you. And you're not finding the joy that you need. And for some people it is, and that's great. But if you're not, it's okay to step back and reflect and start all over again.
And give us the background of why he was even writing this article. Okay, so step us back a year or two and what happened. So he's your younger brother, and he graduated from dental school, what, like 7, 8, 9 years after you?
In 2012, right? So he graduated in 2012, so still relatively a new dentist. He had been working around Calgary. His focus at that point was pay off his loans, and he did that. And didn't work with any associate that he was ready to buy. So he started his own startup. He started his startup in 2016 in Calgary in the middle of recession, and he built a successful practice. And he was very focused on it, loved it. He was awarded, posthumously also. And he was featured on this Dental Town magazine. At the time when he was interviewed, he had also been diagnosed with stage 2 oral squamous cell carcinoma. It was a lesion. I'm sorry. Yes, squamous cell. Mm-hmm. It was a lesion he had found on his tongue, and he had shown me the lesion. We live in 2 different countries. He's in Canada, I'm in New York, and he said, oh, this looks funny and it's been there, it's been present for a while. We think it's lichen planus. So the biopsy got delayed. And one of the major stresses, I would like people to know is pay attention to your bodies, really advocate for yourself, for your patients, and don't delay late diagnosis. The worst is what they got a biopsy done and it was a false, it was negative. That's the good thing. But don't delay. So his biopsy came back and it had spread into his lymph nodes. So he had this major surgery and he chronicled this major surgery along with his startup practice in the Dental Town magazine. And he wrote the article, Dr. Heal Thyself, and which was the major surgery. He'd have his tongue removed. He had a graft placed from his left arm and he bounced back. He had the surgery done in August 2019, 8-hour, multiple doctors. He bounced back. He actually visited me in New York in 2019 because I had just opened up my practice in 2018, end of 18. So, and he had been instrumental in helping me with design, how to design, what to look for, what software to use, how to do Google reviews, how to get on the Google listing.
He was like really into the business stuff, wasn't he?
Totally. And
he was writing too, he was writing even before he had this message about having cancer, right? He was already writing for Dental Town.
He wrote the Dr. Heal Thyself. That's the
that was his first one. Okay.
Post cancer. Yeah. And all his writing he found was during his cancer treatment, because as his cancer progressed and he got more treatment, he took time away from clinical dentistry and he had more time on his hand. He wasn't married, he was single and no kids. So he had to channel his energy, and he loved to read. He was an avid reader, and that's how he found his outlet. He found it in his writings, and he would share them with me all the time and set up a blog, Do a Good Job, which is no longer there. But all of those blogs are now in this book. And so every time he would go in for some procedure, he would reflect on that. And, what is it, fear of being indestructible, especially as a young dentist, you don't think disease, you're the prime of your life. You are, you've paid off your dues and now you're ready to enjoy life. So you don't expect disease to hurt you.
No, you kind of feel invincible when you're young. And then even like as a dentist, like I just find so much irony that a dentist would even get oral cancer. Right. You know what I mean? Like what? We're this is our space. We don't get sick here.
Don't you? And that's why he says it's like the shoemaker who broke his own shoe, Yeah. So you don't think, and I think a part of his late diagnosis, besides not getting the biopsy in time, was this fear, this feeling of being indestructible. And no, it can't happen to me. I'm young. I don't have the risk factors. I'm not a smoker. I'm not old. I'm not, chewing tobacco or, having those factors. So there's that denial. Anyhow, so he started to write. He got his surgery. He visited me in September of 2019. And he's like, okay, this staff is good and this is not good. And these are the reports you need to run. And, he was like, and every beginning of the month, this is how you see your new patients. This is how you see, so he was coaching me, even though he was so much younger than me. He had started his prior to mine, and he helped encourage me. And he was back at work October 1st of today's October 2nd, 2021. October 1st, he was back in New York, in Canada, and he was starting to see patients, but he found he had a lot of numbness from working too long in his left arm because of the graft. Speech was an issue. If you talk too long, focusing was getting harder for him because, he had a major surgery in August and he hadn't really taken time off. So he got an associate. He's like, okay, I'm going to cut back a little bit. And he started to doing things that found him joy, like, he's like, why am I going to wait till I'm 60 to get a Porsche? I'm going to buy a Porsche now.
Yeah. Is that when he got his dog too? I noticed.
Yes. And that's when he got his dog. He's like, I've always wanted to have a dog. I'm going to do these things now. And, unfortunately, sometimes in life when we know that, okay, we have a set time, or, we try to rush everything at one time. And his message was like, stop doing all those things, really live your life now. Tomorrow is not promised to anybody. And So he started doing the things off his bucket list. April of 2020, he, just when COVID was hitting, he had dental work done and he had another swelling on the left side. And they found that the cancer wasn't fully removed and he never got chemo radiation after the first surgery. So lack of chemo radiation and the cancer cells weren't fully removed, the cancer reappeared. And he went and got 33 rounds of chemo radiation. June into July 6th was his last chemo radiation treatment. And so his 34th birthday was amid COVID.
He was such a baby.
Yes.
34
Yeah,
is
34.
So young. Yeah.
And I was planning his 35th birthday, which would have been June of 2021. And I wanted to do a Hawaiian theme because we were supposed to go to Hawaii and that trip got canceled because of COVID. So he finished his chemo radiation and he made a conscious decision. He's like, you know what? Cancer has reappeared. And he had a lesion on his chest. And he had shown me an article he had read. It was a study done in Japan about a young 19-year-old, same, story, tongue lesion, squamous cell carcinoma, metastasized to the lungs. But Manu's metastasis wasn't discovered in that time. In April, when he had his second surgery, they found the lesion on his chest CT. However, they did not do a biopsy. It was small and he was coughing. And it was like a 1.2, it's a small lesion, 1.2 centimeters by 1.8. And the doctors weren't stressing that this is a second lesion. They didn't do a PET scan to see for any other mets, nothing. It was like, okay, you have another lesion. We're going to just reevaluate this in 6 months. It's COVID. They were also trying to I think COVID played a factor. Yeah. Besides having to go through all of that, he went through all the treatments alone. My parents would drop him and pick him up. I couldn't travel because of Canada was on restriction, non-vaccinated. This is a respiratory disease. He is, he's immunocompromised. So I never came. And, my parents were also worried about me contracting COVID. I have a family and they're already suffering with one child. And everything, besides doing everything alone and knowing that your cancer came back, it's the fact that he had no emotional support that you needed from friends and family. Visits were very limited.
Yes.
Nobody's coming and hanging out with you at the hospital.
Everybody's just staying at home by themselves.
That isolation, and this is what I talk about, like isolation. We are isolated in our fields, and now Manu was isolated in his journey and in healing. And, so he had a ton of time. And this is the time when he started writing after his chemo radiation. He really, got onto laptop. Now he was no practice. He had sold his practice. He had to work on getting better. He was mentally and physically very strong. I mean, to have to go through this major surgery and back at work seeing patients, I mean, it takes a lot of courage, not a lot of people will even contemplate, they will say, let me take a few months off. But no, he was very determined, and he was determined to fight through. He writes about this in his book. He's like, I will fight to the end, and that was, he never gave up ever. And
I want to stop you there for a second, because that's one of the first chapters is he talks about hope and how his hope is what he was holding on to. And, this is poignant to read because as you're reading it, you already know he didn't win the war, right? Yes. But he was there. He didn't know if he was going to win, but he's holding on to hope. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so inspiring that he could hold on to hope through multiple surgeries and all those radiations and being by himself.
By himself.
He had to go in and find it within himself. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can learn from it, is that we can see how strong he was. And if he could do it, then if we've got something going on, maybe we can do it too.
Right.
We can be strong like he was.
Right. And he really focuses on hope, that's all we've got. And you hope that you have a better future, whether it happens or not, that's kind of out of your control, but you just hold on to that hope and get through it, and And adversities come in all sorts of ways, whether it's the practice not going well, the marriage, the COVID, the, staff issues, but there's a whole, spectrum of things that go wrong in our lives and in a personal life, divorce, kids, whatever, loss. There's so much, and we still have to hold on to hope. And that's so important.
So he was writing, he was sick, he was getting over the radiation treatments, he was writing, and nobody really knew about the chest lesion.
The chest lesion April was the initial diagnosis of the chest. And then he was supposed to have a fall in October, which didn't happen because of COVID. They pushed, he got it in November. And the lesion had grown 4 times the size. It had become 3.8 by 4.2. And he called me. I was driving home from work, and he would tell me before he told, I'm the older sister, like a mother. So he would, and I'm in the profession, so I got things, I can think clinically besides thinking emotionally. And he's like, this is metastatic. And I'm like, did you get a biopsy? He's like, no, but I really think this is metastatic. This is what the radiologist thinks. The other was like, it could be because fungal infection post-chemo radiation. So it was a ground glass, opaque, ill-defined border lesion. And so we said, okay, let's do the biopsy. The biopsy was scheduled for December 7th. This is mid-November. And he's
2020,
like,
right?
2020, November 2020. And he said, I'm okay. I have accepted my fate. I'll be okay to die. That was very hard for me to hear. And like, he's already given up, not almost given up, but it is come to terms with it. Like, this is my destiny.
Yeah.
And he didn't fight. At any point, he did not argue, oh my God, my oral surgeon diagnosed it late, or oh my God, they didn't do this step, or they didn't do a PET. He never blamed anybody. He didn't blame himself. He didn't blame the society, nothing. He didn't blame the circumstances, his destiny, whatever you call it. He's like, this is it. I've come to terms with it. I'm going to do what I can. And that was, writing about all the little things that he felt were important to share. And so we're like, okay, December 7th, we're going to schedule the biopsy. He's still coughing. December 1st, my parents called me and said, Manu's going to the hospital. He's not able to breathe. They take him in. They found fluid in his lungs. Finally, the PET scan was done. They never did the biopsy. 7th was the biopsy. December 1st, he went into the hospital. They found fluid in his lungs. They did a cytology report on the fluid, and that was positive for squamous cell carcinoma. And the PET scan was done, showed mets to his pelvic bone, and the entire lung lining had cancer. It was deemed inoperable at this point, and the only chances were immunotherapy, which the NIH studies I have read have only, in a 1-year prognosis of only 20%. In a 3-year study, it's 10%, and there's no 5-year study on it. So at this point, it was a losing battle, and he finally got a chest port placed, which wasn't done correctly. So this is, again, just to remind people that this is COVID. Canada has shut borders to America. I'm a dual citizen. But even for me to come, I could come, enter the country, I would have to quarantine for a period of time. So I had to file for a special permission. It's a compassion release from the government of Canada. You have to show paperwork. So while I'm dealing with, I got a phone call that, okay, Manu is getting a port placed. My medical doctor friends are like, Manu does not have time. You need to go get on a plane and get there. Find a way, get to see him. So I shut down my practice for 2 weeks, 1 week to travel, 1 week because I had to quarantine when I came back from Canada, and cancel all the patients, tell the staff,
all the things.
I gotta go. I'm still, my kids, they're still in school. I have to get the nanny, there's so many other factors. Among all of that, I had to file with the Canada for the release, limited release, which places you can only visit the places that they allow you. So my parents' home, letter signed off from the doctors, and I cannot be out there visiting anybody. I have to kind of stay in those areas.
Yes.
And then submit everything, get the permission. Only then I can fly. Then get a COVID test to fly. So I'm not getting a chance to grieve because you are in this. Okay, got to take care of the kids, got to take care of the practice, got to fill out this form, got to make sure everything's done, and get on a plane. And when I got there, he barely spoke. This man was, he was having a hard time walking. He would do one or two sentences. A lot of the, if the doctor's visits had to be changed, he'd be like, like this gasping breath because the fluid buildup was there. He was draining 1 liter of fluid a day, practically.
Was he at home? Was he
Yeah.
in the hospital? He was at
He
home.
was home. He was home. He was home. He was getting palliative care at home. He had a hospital bed. He was, all the doctors were, the nurses were coming to the house to do his port changes, the fluid removal, checking his vitals. And then blood work was also done at home to clear him to go to get his immunotherapy or radiation, whatever treatment he needed. So he would have to have blood work prior to going. So everything was done at home. He had a pain management team. Everything was home. And my dad was living, he had his own house. So my dad was staying with him to help him because he wasn't with the port. It was very, what do you call it? It was very painful to lie down. It was on the side of his chest. So lying down was an issue. He wasn't getting sleep, a lot of pain. He was on a keto diet with intermittent fasting. Again, new studies that he had read had reported that keto diet is starving the cancer cells. And he was very diligent. And I think he was very strict about his diet because he was healthy to begin with, but he was more so because that's the one thing he could control. So,
okay, let me pause you for a second. I want to hear, when you got there, you said he was, he couldn't talk very much, but you got to see him. Like, this has been a burning question for me.
Yes, I was with him. So he had a dog, Maya, and I'm highly allergic to dogs. So what I would do was I would go, my parents lived in their own house and he was in his own house. I would go during the day and kind of give my dad a relief, and my mom would go to work and do whatever she needed to do. So I would give my parents that relief. My dad would take the dog out for a walk because I'm highly allergic. I couldn't be in that room and that same house for long. And I would spend the entire day with him, fix him lunch, dinner, be there for the port place, whenever they drained out the fluid. I would get rid of the fluid in the bathroom, and I would be there when the nurse was helping him with little things, talking, appointments and stuff. And then we would just sit and watch movies.
And how long did you get to stay with him?
1 week. And I would stay until dinner time, but I wouldn't sleep there. I would go home after dinner and then come back in the morning when he's about, and he wouldn't sleep a full restful night. So in between I was there the whole time, and I had a mask on the whole time.
So when you were here, you were there with him for a week, and you got to be his main caretaker during that week and watch movies and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then you had to get home. I mean, you had your kids.
And I still had to, practice kids. I'd left in a hurry. So I was only there for a week, and we took a family picture, and that was our last picture that we took together as I'm going to the airport. Came back, and we were like, okay, things are going to get better. He was in and out of the hospital for something or the other. January, he was admitted 2 weeks in the hospital, and he was not sharing details with us because he hid a lot to protect us from what he's going through. And when the last book that he wrote was on New Beginnings, was while he was in the hospital. So I didn't know. I found a friend who was a doctor, and he looked at the records and told me bluntly, and I couldn't read through it fully. I actually had my husband, it was a Sunday in January. I had my husband read it because I couldn't get through it. And it was, this is the end. You need to make end of life choices. You need to know what his wishes are at this point. And it was very hard for me to, yes, I knew it was metastatic. Yes, I knew that he's going to die very, very soon. I didn't know how much time we had, whether we had a year, but what report I got was within a few months. Anytime now was kind of the thing. This was January. I didn't tell my parents because they were living, breathing Manu and this. So I didn't tell them until his death. Afterwards, I told them that I knew.
Yeah.
And it was very hard for me to accept it. And, and again, now I have to still, the next day is Monday, and I was in the midst of shutting out a practice. I was in the midst of still being a mom, a doctor, a caretaker, and day-to-day things. And I had to really learn how to focus my energy back to being present in what I have to do now. And I cannot change Manu's diagnosis. February, I wanted to go see him, and he's like, no, it's really, really cold. And I'm like, okay, fine. You tell me when you're ready. And because for me to, again, fly again, I was vaccinated at this point, but I still had to quarantine in Canada. I had to get that release because it's only valid for a month. So February 25th, he called me and he said that there was a new lesion. His board site had been changed, and that new lesion has been biopsied and it is metastatic. And he was in the hospital. He had been crying, and he called me and he's like, come March. Mm-hmm. And we booked the tickets for March 20th. And I said, I'll be done I need to get another round of radiation. I'll be done then. You're not going to be able to see me if you fly right now. So come in March. And I'm like, fine. This was end of February. And in this midst of it, when I was there in December, he had expressed his, intent to publish. And I had found him a publisher. And, in February also, I had told him, like, I found you a publisher. Why don't you focus on something good? And he's like, no, I want to write. So he knew he was dying. Yeah. Again, he didn't have a time frame. So he was like, let me write as much as I can. So he's like, don't publish right now. I want to write more. And I said, fine. And unfortunately, the way the events played out, I was supposed to fly on the 20th. March 12th, I got the call from my parents that he's going into the hospital. He had a leg swelling. He had an embolism. He's being admitted. Don't call. He's going to be sedated. Don't talk to him, right? Call him tomorrow. And yeah. I was working the 13th of March. I was at work. And I called my parents in between, and they're like, we're the entire palliative team, and he's being moved to hospice. So I knew at that time, this is the end.
Yeah.
And then finally, I got a hold of my parents in the evening. It was late evening, Saturday. And my mom said, he's not going to make it till the 20th. You need to come home now, if you can. I had my paperwork. All I needed was a COVID test. I went to urgent care. I got it Sunday morning. I was shutting out my practice, the older practice. So I was coming back from Queens, and my mom called me. I still remember the time. I've taken WhatsApp pictures of this. She said, say your goodbye. He's going into organ failure. You need to say goodbye to him. And this is one of the hardest, most life changing things defining things I have to do. I got my husband, I got me, we got him on WhatsApp video call, and he was sedated, barely conscious. And he kept saying, I love you, I love you. That's all he said. So I knew he was able to listen. Mm-hmm. And I said, let go. I'm like, you've been hurting. It's okay. We'll be okay without you. You don't need to hurt anymore. It's okay to go. Don't wait for me. Because I was trying to expedite. I finally did get my COVID test done by my PCP, who came on a Sunday to her office, got it. We gave it, whatever. We got it done. I booked my flights. Yeah. 8 o'clock in the evening, I told my parents, I'm coming. I'll be on the next flight tomorrow. And they said, okay, we're still in the hospice. We're taking turns because it's one person allowed. And 10 o'clock, I've had to shut my practice. I booked a one-way ticket because I wasn't sure when I'm going to come back. He was still alive at this point. Yeah. And had to cancel patients, again, with the nanny, the kids, all of that. And then I told my husband, he was still making the 20th trip that was scheduled. We were both going together at that time. So at 10:30 at night, I'm packing my toiletry. I got that call that I was dreading, and my parents were with him. They're like, he's gone. They're like, we were right there in the room. He's gone. And I couldn't do anything. And, and COVID played such a huge role to this. I could have been there earlier if it wasn't for COVID and all this necessary paperwork. And I couldn't.
And different medical decisions, right? Like there were things that went down medically differently because of COVID.
Right. Delayed treatment. It avoided the emotional and physical support, a hug. I couldn't hug my parents.
Yes.
I couldn't hold them, and they're elderly. They're in late 60s, 70s, and I cannot imagine. I'm a mom. I can't imagine how they left him at the hospital, that knowing that he's dead and he has to be taken to a morgue. It is late at night and come home alone.
Yeah.
Just two of them with no family, nobody, and just come to an empty house. It's dark. And it's dark outside, it's dark in the house, and walk in. And how do you do that? I don't know how they did it. I have no words. And that guilt that I wasn't there as a daughter, as a doctor, as a dentist, not even, and not being able to be there for anyone. And that plays a huge role. And then I had to take that flight alone the next day.
Yeah.
Night was sleeping, knowing he's gone. Then getting up in the morning, flying alone. And I flew, because I booked any flight I could get. I flew from New York to Texas to Calgary, because I didn't see, and I didn't see him until the funeral home, and I planned the funeral. And then my whole focus, because I was there alone with no kids or my husband for a week. He passed away, and I found the articles, his writings. I got onto his laptop, found his, all the articles printed, and the ones that were not completed, I included them in the book as is.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, interrupted thoughts.
Interrupted ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And
well, let's switch gears for a minute, because you found the articles. You knew they were there. He said, we're going to publish them. This has given you something. It's been, how long has it been now? 6 months? 8 months?
6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 months. And the book's published, right?
Yes.
And now you're going about, this is still very fresh.
Yes.
You're going, right? You're like touring. I mean,
I'm trying to get his message.
So why are you doing this? This is hard, right? Like,
it's very hard.
What is driving you right now?
So what's driving it's part of my healing process. I wrote my little blebs about the book, the foreword, the epilogue, on his computer with his articles. After rereading those articles, this was his message. He was very vocal about his journey. It is to share his wisdom that he felt as he faced mortality.
Like two main points, right? That he was trying to get across.
And one of the main points that he had, he felt a failure. He talks about being indestructible, but one of the things that he talks about is the fear. A lot of times we're stuck in a rut. We don't want to change our practice. We don't want to change where we're living. We don't want to change getting out of a marriage. We don't want to change life, changing careers, whatever it is that in life that we are a lot of times bound by our own fears. And he talks so much about the fear of failing, the fear of doing a change, because what if it doesn't succeed? Well, what if you do succeed, right? And, sometimes we're so bogged down by our failures that we think that it defines us. And I'm just going to quote this article here, is that within each failure is a great opportunity for us to learn and move forward. However, that requires us to go beyond the emotional aspect of failure and fundamentally isolate our emotions to identify the learning opportunities presented before us. And he wrote this.
And that's in the book, right?
That's the book.
You're holding the book. Okay.
On the aspect of failure. So, and he talks about this, and same thing about failure and fear, a fear of failing. They're intertwined almost. And he repeats it over and over again, and let it not define us, and let us learn and not do the same things again and improve ourselves. Whether it's it could be something small, sensitivity after a filling, or it could be something big. The practice didn't thrive, and now you have to change gears. Whatever it is, we need to focus on that. And then the other thing he talked a lot about was.
Wait, I want to say one thing before you move on, because he said something, he taught this principle, and I think it's so important. Sometimes we don't try things because we're afraid of failing, but it's okay if we fail. So stop worrying about if we fail and stop being afraid and just do the thing that you're wanting to do.
I'm sure
you said, look, I even just lost all my money in this one stock, because that's one of his chapters. I did this thing where I had all my life savings and it's gone, and I'm still here and I'm fine.
And focus on the good stuff, focus on your family, whatever is good in your life. Focus on those, and don't be scared not to try something, because there'll be a point where you'll be like, I wish I had done it, and you were scared. You were fearful.
I let the fear stop me from trying.
Right, exactly.
And what was his other point?
About, we're all mortal beings. We all are going to die. Don't fear your death. Okay, but leave something behind. The way to stay immortal really is to leave something good for humankind, whether it's in his writings, or whether it's inventing something or doing something, or helping, volunteering. That's, what he did a lot of, volunteering your time to underserved, a way to contribute to the society, that you are remembered still for the goodness that you did. And you'll still stay immortal in people's minds and thoughts. We're not physically there, but we are still there in our work, so that's how you stay immortal.
I think that's amazing. I have to say, as I was reading it, it was so fascinating to think, wow, I am right now inside the mind of a man who is going to be dying soon. He's not sure, but he's holding on to hope, and he's facing his own mortality. And not only is he a man, but he's a dentist with oral cancer. And so all those things together made it extremely poignant to read. And it's a very, very important point about, we're all going to die. Even dentists with oral cancer are going to die sometimes. And it's okay. That's a part of being a human. And the way we create our immortality is by leaving something behind. And that's exactly what he did. And I know you're here to kind of represent that, to get it out there, and also a little bit to do your part in the grieving, because you're kind of alone out there in Long Island, right? Your parents are far away and don't have any other siblings.
No siblings and no aunts, uncles. All my grandparents have deceased. No, there's nobody of my family.
Yeah. What do you hope becomes of this book?
I really hope that people, it becomes a wake-up call. I think COVID definitely was a wake-up call for a lot of dentists, when they had to kind of, change gears, see less people, and, skyrocketing prices. Do we want to take insurance? Do we want to go fee for service? Do we want to stop Medicaid? So COVID definitely was a wake-up call in a lot of aspects, but I'm going to focus on dentistry. And I hope that this book is also a wake-up call to people to know, if whatever they're doing in life, whether it's dentistry or whether they're not happy of any aspect of their life, maybe it's moving to another state, something simple as that, or not working for a DSO and want to go do something else, or unhappy with certain relationship, whatever it is, it's a wake-up call that life is short. Really focus on things that make you internally happy. Stop chasing, and he talks about this, on chasing trophies. Whether in young, we're like, okay, we got to win that race, we got to win the meet, we got to be the top GPA, we got to be the first in our dental school so we can get into that specialty that we want, and while we're chasing, and then as we get older, we're chasing, we want the big house, and we want the Maserati, and we want, whatever the materialistic things, and we forget to feed our souls. And he talks a lot about this. It's like he found his soul, he found his inner peace. And while we're in the rat race chasing for materialistic things and tangible things, we don't lose ourselves in it. We don't lose our relationships. We hold on to those dear and dear to us. And And I hope this book kind of makes you sit up and reflect on your life and where you are, where you want to be. Can we work there? What changes do we need to make? And, be happy internally. Internal happiness, nothing can replace that. We can be empty. Yeah.
I definitely think the book is doing that. I mean, it did it for me. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I really appreciate you, putting yourself out there. Because I was telling you before we started recording, I think at this point, I might still be hiding in my hidey hole and saying, what if? And I wish they would have, or I wish he would have. And I wish I could have done it wrong. But you're turning this really hard thing into something that's going to create his immortality.
I hope. And I write about this in the epilogue that we're stuck with this what if that you say.
Mm-hmm.
What if this is done? What if there was an early diagnosis, a PET scan? What if? And we're so lost in the what ifs and this isolated bubbles, and more so with COVID, we're in these little bubbles that we forget the bigger picture. We forget that we failed. Maybe there's a reason for a failure because we're supposed to turn in a different direction. And one door shut because another door had to open, and we forget that. And we don't see, I don't know why he died. I don't know why he died young, and he died with, pain and suffering. But maybe there is a bigger calling to this all. And hopefully this book helps save a life with early diagnosis, save a life in changing people's perspectives or whatever they're, and I hope it just brings some peace and contentment that the world may still fall all around us. The world may fall apart, but if you're at peace with yourself, it will be okay.
So if I'm one of the listeners of this podcast, I'm going, what the heck? How do I find this book? Because we haven't said the name. And tell me the name of the book and your brother's full name so that we can find it for the listeners.
Sure. So the book is Life Interrupted, Dr. Dua's Survival Guide. It's by Dr. Manu Dua. That's Manu Dua. And it's on Amazon. It's on Kindle.
I got mine on Kindle.
Yep.
So you can do Kindle.
Yep. There's a Kindle and a paperback version. That's the best way to get it. I've had some doctors who have gotten it multiple copies. I've had a hospital take a few copies of the book. So if somebody needs more, like 10, 20, 30 copies or 50 copies, they can directly email me and I can have it from the publisher for bulk orders. But otherwise, Amazon's, Amazon Prime.
And it's a quick read. You can read that in one flight or one quiet evening with some popcorn or some ice cream or a glass of wine or whatever. And it's just the message in there is so important. Like we said, there's a reason you're out here. You're still in this grieving stage, but you're out here promoting the book because the message is so important. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any last words you want to say before we have to close this? Okay, well, Parul, thank you. I just want to thank you again so sincerely for joining me in this podcast. I know it's going to be a really special episode, and I hope a lot of women get this message that we're trying to convey.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this, for everything, and for helping me with spreading his message. And thank you.
Of course, you deserve all the help you can get. This is a big job you've got.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Love Your Practice with Dr. Laura Mack. I would love to meet you. To join our movement, find the Facebook group called Love Your Practice and request to join. If you can't find it, just send me a message and I'll add ya. You'll find me there helping all of my ladies to fall in love with their businesses and have a better life.